As part of our Young South Africans with a different series, I'm joined by Ashley Ace, who continues to redefine the field of medical research. Hi, Ashley. So tell me about Medical Diagnostics and how it began.
Medical Diagnostic is a Cape Town-based manufacturer of diagnostic test kits for alcohol, drugs of abuse, HIV, malaria, pregnancy, and ovulation fertility. We manufacture quick tests whereby you can get results between 5 and 30 minutes.
And just tell me, how did you get the capital to actually start manufacturing all these medical kits?
Yeah, in 2006, I started my first business. I established Real World Diagnostics, and I basically focused on importing and distributing diagnostic test kits. So I decided to initially grow my market share, and when I made enough capital to set up a manufacturing facility, I then took the revenue generated from Real World Diagnostic to invest into Medical Diagnostic, and hence in 2010 I established Medical Diagnostic.
And considering the fact that malaria is a very major issue in Africa, how are you contributing to the solution?
Because we're an African-based company, we know that malaria is killing our brothers and sisters out in Africa. And of course, as a social responsibility, we knew that we had a technology platform to be able to manufacture a high-quality malaria test kit. Of course, the test kit must be able to be used in rural areas, in remote areas, and the cost of the test kit was very important as well. So we've developed a malaria test kit that can actually distinguish between the strains of malaria, which will aid in treatment, and our test kit can also show if the treatment's effective or not.
And you've made a regular appearance on the Forbes list of young entrepreneurs, 2 years in a row. How do you do it?
I think it's my age. Being a scientist, I started my business at the age of 24, and it's very difficult. One of the biggest barriers, or the biggest barrier, is actually being a scientist at the age of 24. So to be able to do R&D, you need a significant sum of capital to invest into R&D projects. For me, being 24 at the time when I started the business, the barrier was getting industry to take me serious. So of course, profile building was very important for me. I looked at entering competitions, I looked at building my profile as a scientist, and I looked at bootstrapping the model and organically growing the company. So I focused a lot on getting market share, and because of that, my profile also, I built my profile at the same time.
How are you working with the South African government to actually combat drug abuse?
Of course, if you look at the low socioeconomic conditions of South Africa, especially where I come from, the Cape Flats, drugs of abuse, major problem. You can't have kids at school being on drugs. How are you going to grow the economy by not having properly educated individuals and youngsters coming up into industry? So from a social responsibility perspective as well, we looked at quick tests whereby a parent can test the individual, a loved one, a kid, a husband for drugs by dipping a test into urine for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, they'll get the result. And it can show the class of drugs as well.
And Ashley, you've come such a long way with your business, but what has been your greatest challenge this far?
Of course, like any entrepreneur will say, capital is your biggest challenge, cash flow. Initially, if you go for an investment, having an idea, you can imagine the amount of equity and a shareholder or a potential investor will request from you. So organically growing is a good way of doing it. Looking at first getting into the market and establishing yourself in the market by selling somebody else's product is probably the easiest way to do it. Of course, you have to negotiate credit terms. You negotiate terms with your customers, make sure that they pay you before you need to pay your suppliers. That's a challenge on its own. But also profile building, you as a business entrepreneur, you need to have some sort of profile, because when you go to meetings, people need to know who they're talking to. It's very difficult to get high-end meetings, top-end meetings, if you don't have a profile. You're always talking to the wrong person. So hence, to bring that also into perspective, that's the importance of networking. Always going to events, go to conferences, etc. So yeah, it's initially your age and cash flow. That's my experience.
You've given us a lot of tips of how people can actually make sure that they build their profiles as young entrepreneurs. Do you have any other tips that?
Yeah. If you believe that you have a good idea and you want to enter a certain industry, it is important that you understand your industry, of course. So the first thing I would say, map out that industry, understand the market, look at all the competitors in that industry. I mean, there's Google to do that. And also go to like the small enterprise development agency. They're there to help. These government business incubators, they're there to help. Understand that market so well that you know for sure that you're not going into a market that is saturated and whereby you go competing with the big multinationals. They can crash you, you know, with the cash flow and the resources they have. So understand that market, I believe, and differentiate, see how you can be unique. How can you enter this market, maybe a niche section of this market, to initially grow your business.